Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frank Mullen. I'm president of the Southwest Miramichi Bay of Inn Riding. I want to thank all for taking the time to come out tonight and hear the message from the People's Alliance. Having a biased opinion, I know you're going to be well satisfied. And did you know that when you mix red and blue together, you get purple? So at this time, I'd like to introduce the candidate for Southwest Miramichi Bay of Inn. So I'm excited to be here tonight to have this opportunity to introduce our candidate for the People's Alliance Party, Mr. Arthur O'Donnell. Mr. O'Donnell's experience include 25 years in the Canadian Navy as a senior supervisor. He was a water operator level 1, village of Doketown. He's been self-employed, he's been tech support, and he presently works at Home Hardware in Doketown. Aside from his work and family, Arthur is a councillor for the village of Doketown and volunteers as a firefighter. Been on the executive of the Legion Branch number 23 for the past 8 years, 3 years as president, and is the past president and general manager of the Miramichi River Maniac Junior B Hockey Club. So as you can see, he believes in giving back to the community. I believe that we're very fortunate in having Art representing the people of Southwest Miramichi Bay of Inn. So without further ado, please join me in welcome Art O'Donnell.
I had a big write-up, but Frank took everything from me, so it's going to be short and sweet. We get the main attraction here. Chris is going to come and speak to us, but before we do anything, I'd like everybody to take a moment of silence for the two tragedies that our country's had over the last month, the Humboldt Broncos and what went on in Toronto yesterday. So just take the time. And 6 months ago, I never dreamt that I'd be in this position. I took a scoot with Dougie Lines over to Minto and met with Chris, and we had a chat about the party and if I would be interested in running, and at that time we had Lester too that was also interested, and that fire I guess started at that point. Even though I'm on council, I never really thought of myself as a politician or really having much interest in going down that road. But as time goes on and I talk to Chris and I get the message and I talk to the people, I realize, my goodness, we're in bad shape. We need a change. And if people step back and look at all the facts, listen to Chris, you get an opportunity, read about what we're saying, you're going to realize that we're going down the right path. We have to turn things around. This come up 10 times since I came here tonight. This place is beautiful. We have a beautiful place here in Miramichi, and what's going on is not good. Everybody's leaving, and we can't just shut the doors. So 6 months later, we're almost 5 months from an election. I have my work cut out for me. Just seeing this kind of support in a small community, in a small hall, tells me that I have to get my butt out and I have to knock on every door that I can. We have 12,000 people in Southwest Miramichi Bay of Inn, and probably about 6,000 households. So we have a fantastic team led by Frank. We're going to be out knocking. We're going to go to every door we can, and we're going to get the blue and the red on their heels really quick. Apparently they're already there, according to a couple of Facebooks and email messages that we've received in the last day or so. So bring it on. We're going to fight. We're going to win. Okay, so I spoke about meeting with Chris. Very, very good speaker. Put the pressure on him here, but he passes a passionate message, and he doesn't pass it because he's just good at speaking. He passes it because he cares and he knows what he's doing. So let's give it up for our leader and the next premier of the province, Chris Austin.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see such a fine crowd in the metropolis of Macnamee. I know there's other things going on in the area, and I hear the Maple Leafs are playing too, but you're here. So I'll make sure you're out before. What time's the game start?
8:30.
8:30. We'll do our best. Make sure you get out to the game.
Don't make promises you can't.
There you go. There you go. That was perfect timing there too, eh? Yeah, for sure. So the main idea, of course, tonight is we've been doing these all over the province. We've been going to, and we do it in a lot of small towns, rural areas, because I find sometimes, I'm from a somewhat rural area. I live in the village of Minto, but, it's kind of a rural area compared to some of the bigger cities. And I find that, sometimes when you're in a rural area, you feel like you've been forgotten by government. And I find, people in rural areas, need to hear the message that we're giving out. So we've been going all over the province, getting this message out, showing people what we want to do, telling people that, there's an alternative to what we've had for government in the past, and how we desperately need change. We just can't keep doing what we've been doing. There's no other way to say it. There's no other way. It's just that simple. We can't keep doing what we've always done and expect some type of different outcome, because reality is things are getting worse, and there's not even a plan to make it better from what we're seeing from the two parties. And they've had their kick at the can. They've made decisions, quite frankly, that has brought us to where we're at. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are as a province, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit as well about what our plan is to turn things around. And then at the end we'll open up for question and answer. So if you have any questions or comments, concerns, you will have opportunity on the floor, and I'll do my best to answer your question. If it's for Art, you can ask him as well. I'm sure he would do his best to answer it as well. So we just want to say thank you, I guess, for coming out and taking the time to be here. So New Brunswick is in a very critical moment. We are sitting now with approximate $14.4 billion debt. And that's with a population of about 750,000 people. Now, if you take the population of New Brunswick and you step back and you look at the, country as a whole, or the globe as a whole, you realize that 750,000 people is really the size of a small city on a global scale. And while we're spread out on a much larger scale geographically, the province as a whole, it still really hits home the size of the debt that we have, that we all have to shoulder the burden of, as well as our kids and grandkids, nieces, nephews. Every citizen, every person in this province is carrying that debt load of $14.4 billion in debt. That debt has gotten to the place where it is because over the last 10 years, every single government, liberal and conservative, has ran a deficit or has ran the province in the red every single year. If a business operated their management the same way liberal and conservative governments have operated the province, the business would be bankrupt. It's just that simple. We've gotten to a place now where the current government, in a vain effort to keep things afloat, so they say, has raised taxes over 10 times. And I don't know if you folks remember the strategic reviews they did on the budget. Do you remember where they went all over the province holding these public town hall meetings, and they were asking the public, we're in a tough pinch here as a province, and we need suggestions from the public on how to cut the debt, how to eliminate the deficit, how to properly manage the province's finances and government services and all this sort of thing. So I went to one in Minto. Some of our people, was at some of the other ones offering suggestions to the government in good faith to see these changes. Well, I remember sitting to the one in Minto, and I don't know if any of you attended the ones up this way, but I sat in the one in Minto, and I was listening. I didn't want to be, it wasn't my job to be the center of attention. I just wanted to hear what people were saying and how the government was responding to it. And what I kept hearing over and over is people saying things like, we need to eliminate duality. Why are we paying for two of everything in this province simply based on language when we could do well to afford to pay for one that works for both? That was a big one. Another one I kept hearing over and over is, why does government give our tax dollars to big corporate industries? Why are we giving hundreds of millions of dollars every year to corporate industries to create call centers and so-called jobs that most of the time never even come to fruition? I heard talk about managing government better, finding ways and efficiencies within each department. I heard all kinds of suggestions, good suggestions from the people that live it every day. Shortly after that program review was done and the big tour was done and government had closed up and said, we got all the information from the people, they come out with this report. And in that report they said, this is what the people said and this is what we're going to do. Well, what blew my mind is really, if you take the report and boil it down, what they did was they said the people wants to save healthcare and education, so the people have advised us to raise the HST. I didn't hear that in my meeting. I talked to others that went to meetings around the province and said, did you hear that as a suggestion, that the people want their taxes raised? No, I didn't. We never heard that. So you kind of come to the conclusion that this whole thing was a sham, right? To window dressing. Let's hear what the people are saying, and then we're going to do what we planned to do from the beginning anyway, which was raise HST and some other measures that they did to try to get it up. Now here's the real kicker of it all. They raised the HST. Matter of fact, they've raised taxes 10 times since they've taken office. They've brought in an additional close to $1 billion in additional revenue they never had before. So they raise all these taxes, bring in all this money, and I'm thinking to myself, with all of these taxes being raised and all this extra money coming in, surely the government will at this point, finally, after 10 years, be able to balance the books and start to eliminate that debt as we balance the books and eliminate the deficit. But no, sir. This year alone, they're talking about another deficit. So they spent almost $1 billion extra in revenue, and they're still borrowing money on our backs and the backs of our kids in the future. So we are still going to have a deficit at the end of this year, and our debt is probably going to be closer to $14.5 billion because of the mismanagement and waste that's been going on. New Brunswick is one of the highest tax provinces in the nation. And I was shocked to hear the finance minister, we do these CBC political panels every Thursday. We're doing one tomorrow. We're going to be talking about roads. That'll be a good one. What roads? Yeah. So we do these panels every Thursday. The finance minister got on here a panel several weeks ago, and she actually said, New Brunswickers can't handle any more taxes. And I thought, that's pretty rich, coming from the finance minister and the government, who's already raised taxes 10 times since you've been in office. So you finally, after people have been burdened and burdened and burdened with taxes, finally you've come to the conclusion, we can't handle any more taxes. And I felt like saying to her, Mrs. Minister, you have to realize the carbon tax is still coming down the pike too. So with the taxes all of us are paying right now, the carbon tax is yet to come on to that tax rate that we're going to be paying as well. And people say, well, the carbon tax, that affects industry and it affects, it doesn't affect the people. That's just, they're going to tax the big polluters. No, sir. Matter of fact, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation put out a research panel on the carbon tax to estimate what it's going to cost. And they figured the average Canadian household will be paying an additional $2,269 in additional taxes per household than what they're paying right now. So your groceries are going to go up, your electricity is going to go up, anything that's transported by truck, there's going to be a fuel tax, part of the carbon tax, that's all going to go up. When they introduced the carbon tax on a federal level, the provincial government said, we'll make sure it's cost neutral so that nobody's actually taxed. We'll collect the taxes because we have to, the federal government's making us, but we'll give it back to them in some way to make sure that the money stays in people's pockets. That's what they first said. Now they're backing off on that and saying, well, we're not sure if we can make it revenue neutral anymore, and they're not sure what plan they're going to have with the carbon tax. So we just can't take any more taxes. It's simple as that. We've been taxed to the max in what we can give from our pockets. I'm a firm believer that if you want a prosperous economy, if you want sustainable jobs from the private sector, If you want a province that people will come to rather than leave, you cannot continue to create these additional taxes. You can't tax your way to prosperity. And if you want small businesses to grow, you've got to reduce taxes. If you want to see new industry come in, you've got to reduce taxes. If you want people to have more spending money, more capital in their wallet, that they can keep the economy going by spending more money, then you have to let them keep the money rather than giving it to government to waste on some pet political project, which does nothing for the people in the end anyway. So we have to get rid of these taxes and reduce these taxes, while at the same time making sure those that are not paying taxes are paying their fair share. So here's our plan on tax reform, and we are very strong on this issue when it comes to taxes. We are committed to eliminating the small business tax. So if you operate a small business in the province of New Brunswick under a People's Alliance banner, you would not be paying a small business tax. We would eliminate it. And just to put it in perspective, when we had this, and we're going to cost this out for our platform coming up in the fall, but when we committed to this last election, it was an average cost of about $9 million a year that would have been lost to the general revenue to eliminate the small business tax. So think about that. You're helping every small business in the province of New Brunswick, and it's only costing, or the lost revenue for government is about $9 million. They just gave TD Bank the same amount of money to create a few call centers in the province. So it's not a lot of money, right? But it's a little incentive to help that small business, because small businesses that have the extra money, they may hire that extra employee, they may put it back into their business, they may expand in some way, or they may just keep it for themselves and spend it on the local economy. We don't care what you do with it, because we're convinced if you have more money in your pocket, the money's going to be spent, and when it's spent, there's 15% HST, which will come back to the government anyway. So it's things that help keep the economy going. We're determined to eliminate that small business tax. Another tax that desperately has to be eliminated is the double tax. New Brunswick is unique in so many good ways, and it's unique in so many bad ways. The double tax is a bad way that we're unique. We're the only province in Canada that actually does this form of taxation known as a double tax. Now, for those of you in the building tonight, if you own more than one piece of property, if you have a cottage, if you're a landlord, you own another piece of property for whatever reason, you are paying a double tax on that second piece of property. So whatever your tax bill is at the home you live in, it's pretty much doubled for the same home that you don't live in. We are the only province in Canada that taxes that way. So what happens with this double tax is you have developers, you have real estate people that want to build buildings, buy buildings, renovate buildings, and help the economy go. I talked to several of them in Fredericton, I've talked to them in St. John. Actually, there's a good friend of mine in St. John, and he runs a development down there. What he does, he buys those old historic buildings in St. John, and he buys them, he renovates them, and then he rents them out for either businesses or residential or whatever. And he was telling me one time, he said, Chris, he said, all these buildings that I own in St. John that I rent out, he said, combined, I'm paying about $1.2 million a year just in double tax. And he said to me, he said, what could I do with $1.2 million if I could keep that money rather than give it to the government? And I said, I don't know. What would you do? He said, I'll tell you what I do. I buy the building on the north side that I've had my eye on, and when I buy that, I'm going to hire laborers, I'm going to hire carpenters, I'm going to hire electricians, I'm going to hire plumbers, I'm going to hire painters, I'm going to hire all kinds of people to work on that building. And that other building on the south side that I've been eyeing on, that would be my next project, and I'd hire more people for that. That's one developer in St. John. So we can take that $1.2 million from that gentleman and stunt his growth and stunt the economy, put it into the hands of government, who ends up wasting it on some stupid project that doesn't need to be done. And so what stupid projects are you referring to? Do you have time? Right? Let me give you one, just as an example. Thank you. The government has this bright idea, and I'll call it right out for what it is. It's politics. It's not practical, it's politics. They're building a brand new 4-lane highway in Shediac. A 4-lane highway in Shediac. They're estimating the provincial portion of that cost right now is about $182 million for that 4-lane highway. They can't even plow the roads we have now. They can't fix the potholes we have now. They can't maintain the infrastructure we have now, and they're doing more projects in areas where it just doesn't justify it. I don't know if you've seen the recent report on CBC where they said the numbers simply don't justify building this brand new highway. It just doesn't. So it's political. It's political pandering, right, at its worst. So I'm convinced that if you have government that operates things like education, healthcare, infrastructure, social programs, your basic social programs, these things that government is supposed to be doing, and quit worrying about these other projects and these other things which should have nothing to do with government. It gives the opportunity for lower taxes to make sure people have more money in their pockets that they can spend on the economy. So we are going to eliminate that double tax and put more money in people's pockets. Now to make up, because anytime you eliminate tax on one hand, you have to make up revenue on the other. Well, the first thing when you eliminate the double tax, you're going to spur the economy. So there's going to be all kinds of jobs that are going to come in through development. There's going to be taxes paid on the income with those jobs. There's going to be taxes paid on materials purchased through those jobs. HST is going to be flowing into the province. So there's going to be a residual income that's going to come in from eliminating that tax. But furthermore, it's taxing those that are not paying their fair share of tax. And I can promise you, if you're in this building tonight, you're paying your fair share of tax. I'm convinced of that. I don't care what your income is, it doesn't matter. You're being taxed enough, one way or the other. But I'll tell you who's not paying a fair share of tax. Large industry in the province of New Brunswick. And I'll give you an example. The Irving Oil Refinery in St. John. Anybody ever see the Irving Oil when you've been down in St. John? I'm sure you have. That Irving Oil Refinery is the largest refinery in Canada. It's the largest refinery on the eastern seaboard, and it's one of the largest refineries in North America. That refinery in St. John pays an average of about $4 million a year in taxes. $2 million goes to the province of New Brunswick, and approximately $2 million goes to the city of St. John. You may say, well, $4 million a year in taxes for one industry, that's pretty good. Okay. If you took that refinery and you picked it up and you dropped it in the middle of Alberta, that very same refinery would be paying between $24 to $26 million every year. That's one large industry in the province of New Brunswick, and we could go through all the large industry. Well, how do they do that? Well, here's how they do it. Let's look at the LNG terminal, another one in St. John. Remember when LNG had a tax break of 25 years, they didn't pay any taxes? Remember that story was in the media there for a while? And the city of St. John said, look, we're broke, we're financially desperate. We need the tax revenue from this LNG terminal. So the government did the right thing and canceled the tax deal on that LNG terminal. So City of St. John was jubilant about it. They thought, great, we get several millions of dollars that's going to be coming in from that LNG terminal. What the province of New Brunswick then did is, while they're going to tax the LNG terminal, they hired consultants from New Jersey to come to New Brunswick at a cost of $75,000, and that company from New Jersey prides itself in lowballing the assessments of industrial properties. So this company comes from New Jersey, comes into St. John, goes through the LNG terminal and the plant and all the infrastructure down there, and they basically cut the assessment, I think it was 69%. So the taxes that place should have been paying under a reasonable assessment, because they lowballed the assessment, the taxes went down that they had to pay. So they've got you coming or they've got you going. So what we are saying is, large industry needs to be paying a fair and reasonable tax rate in the province of New Brunswick and still be competitive with other provinces in Canada. Because if we can get tax revenue from industry in a fair and reasonable manner, we can lower the tax burden on the citizens that are carrying an unfair tax burden on day-to-day living. And we will do that by including machinery and equipment in assessment. See, in other provinces, they include the machinery and equipment that's in these buildings, but in New Brunswick they don't. So that's lowering their taxes that they're paying every year. So we believe there has to be an elimination of the small business tax, an elimination of the double tax, and making sure large industry is paying fair, reasonable, and yet still competitive tax rates to balance the equation out for the people of New Brunswick. The second thing that we are committing to is language fairness. New Brunswick is truly unique in the language issue. And I talk to people all over the province. I talk to people of Anglophone descent, people of Francophone descent, and they all tell me the same thing, is that New Brunswick is out of balance when it comes to the language issue. It's out of whack. And we've called for an end to duality in the province of New Brunswick, and I'll give you an example. The emergency rooms in our hospitals, depending on which one you go to, you're going to be waiting a long time. And I'm hearing about the deck in Fredericton where wait times are from 8, 10, 12 hours. I'm hearing from patients that are going in on an ambulance and still sitting there in the hallway waiting to be admitted. So our healthcare system truly is in a crisis. Excuse me. So we have to change the culture of healthcare. We have to change how we spend our money towards healthcare. And I'll tell you one area where we shouldn't be spending money in healthcare, and that is to keep two healthcare authorities afloat. We're paying for Vitalite, right, which is a Francophone health authority, and we're paying for Horizon, which is I suppose an Anglophone health authority. But both of these health authorities provide bilingual service to their patients. So they're both achieving the same objective, but what they're doing is the administrating side of both is costing money to the taxpayers every year. The former finance minister pegged that estimated amount between $40 to $60 million every single year we're paying on these two health authorities. So our objective, and what we have been saying, is that these two things that we're paying for, and health needs to be brought into one health authority, saving money, putting that money back into the front line where it needs to go. School buses. Who would believe that in this part of the world, in this day and age, that our government will not allow French and English children to travel on the same bus? It's mind-blowing. I've never heard tell of such ridiculous and frankly, this is a form of segregation. It's separating our cultures simply based on language. So now what we have is we have an English school bus that will go down the road packed full of kids. And then behind that English school bus, we'll have a French school bus with a handful of kids on it, chasing each other around the province, dropping them off at different schools, and guess who's paying for it? You're paying for it, and I'm paying for it, and the kids are paying for it because they're not able to travel together and God forbid, learn from each other and learn each other's language and culture and grow in that way. And look, I've said this before. These buses pick these kids up. When they drop them off at night, guess what happens? The English and the French kids, they go and play on the same hockey team. They go on the same playground. They go on the same volleyball, hockey, soccer team, basketball, whatever. They play together. And I'm from Minto, and I'm always proud to say I'm from Minto. I love that community. But growing up in Minto in its former days was a coal mining capital of the Eastern Seaboard. And there was prosperity there with the coal mines, and they brought people from all over the world to work in those coal mines. And we have German, Dutch, French, English, Italian, every nationality, ethnicity you can think of worked in those coal mines. And Minto to this day is still very culturally diverse. You just look at a phone book and you can see all the different names from different cultures around the world. And Minto is a very cohesive community. You never see cultures fighting against each other. We get along, we work together, we play together, and that's the way it's always been. But the problems come into play when government enacts these ridiculous policies and these outdated laws which basically cause the friction and cause the division within our people in the province. So what we want to see, and I want to state this very clearly, the People's Alliance fully believes in the rights for French and English citizens to receive service in their language of choice. We believe in that, and we agree with that. What we don't agree with is this 100% bilingual target across the province for every single region. We do not agree that every paramedic in every ambulance in every area of the province needs to be bilingual. We don't agree with that. because it simply doesn't make sense. And the demographic doesn't support that policy. The recent arbitration that the paramedics fought, I praise the arbitrator for coming out with finally some common sense when it comes to government policy. And he said the same thing. Every ambulance has a dedicated translation line. Every single one. Doesn't matter what language they come across, they pick up that line, the paramedic, and they can have a translator, if needed, to be able to translate between the patient and the paramedic to make sure things are done the way it needs to be done. Every ambulance has that. So why do we have to make every paramedic be bilingual? It just doesn't make sense, and it's unattainable. So what's happening is you have paramedics here at home who are struggling to get full-time work, and what are they doing? They're getting on a plane and they're going to Alberta and they're working for paramedic service in Alberta. They're going to Nova Scotia. They're going to the States. They're going anywhere else they can find good paying work in their profession. I get emails on a regular basis of skilled, qualified, experienced people that are begging to come back to this province and work here at home, but they can't because of unnecessary language requirements. So it hurts everybody. It's hurting those that can't get the jobs. It's hurting us who are not having the experience within the government that have those skill sets. It's hurting Anglophone, Francophone. We're all suffering as a result of this. So we have to tone down the idea that we need this broad stroke approach to language across the province. And we need to look at the demographics and say, where is it needed? If it's needed in this area, make sure that needs met. But in other areas, let's use technology, let's use translation to be able to meet the needs and still have the same outcome. So another part of language fairness is we're going to abolish the office of the Official Language Commissioner. That office has done nothing but cause division and frustration among government departments and among the people that suffer from that office. Now, I hear that the current language commissioner is on her way out, and I'll take credit for that. Listen, no one person should have the authority to be a citizen, file a report to herself as a language commissioner, investigate that report herself as a language commissioner, and then release the results of that report as a language commissioner, confidentially, not publicly, because they don't do that, but confidentially, privately release that information to whatever government department's affected. That to me is just not right. And we all know the case of Wayne Grant here a couple years ago. People say, he shouldn't have been working the front desk because he wasn't bilingual and blah, 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 blah. So what they did was they took this poor man who was just, a few months away from retirement, and they put him out in the middle of a parking lot in the middle of January, because they didn't dare have him on the front desk after the language commissioner came through. It's absolutely ridiculous. I was shocked that people weren't storming the legislature with pitchforks and torches demanding that these changes be made. But when you talk to people on a one-to-one basis, everybody feels the same way. This is ridiculous, and this sort of thing has to stop. When you have students who are posing as secret patients, going into our hospitals, and for no other purpose than to do language audits on the administration, on the nurses, on all the, the steps that they're going through, to make sure they're getting the active offer, to make sure they're getting French and English service as they go through. Tying up wait times, sitting in listen, folks, that's all nonsense. Our nurses, our doctors, our healthcare system, we have enough problems. They have enough stress doing their job on a day-to-day basis, getting real patients and sick people through. We don't need to be dealing with this language nonsense in the midst of it. That's the kind of thing that we are going to put an end to. It's got to stop. And I'll tell you what, the more the other parties shy away from this issue, the stronger we're going to be on it. Because there's no doubt in my mind, it has to change. It has to change. We also believe in ending corporate welfare. I said earlier, TD Bank got around $9 million to create some call centers. Okay? On an average year, any average year, the New Brunswick government gives out between $240, $270, $300 million in some type of corporate handout. Now, We never know exactly how many jobs are created because they don't actually check. You know, they announce these big numbers. So we've given X amount, I think Bell at one point got $5 million, and TD Bank's getting 9. Oh, Sears, let's not forget Sears. Remember that one? Now, luckily, from what we understand, unless there's something hidden there, which wouldn't surprise me, but from what we understand, no money has been given to Sears because they went bankrupt before the check was handed over type of deal. But here you've got a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. Everybody knew they were on the verge of bankruptcy. You didn't have to have an economist degree to know Sears is going under. So everybody knew it. But yet Opportunities New Brunswick thought it'd be a good idea under government direction to give Sears $9 million for a couple of call centers. And again, I'll never forget the quote that was given by the CEO of Opportunities New Brunswick when the media asked him, well, this $9 million, what's up with that? Sears Canada, what's this about? And this was after Sears went bankrupt. And the CEO said, well, we thought at the time it was a good idea. That was it. That was the explanation. That was the headline. We thought at the time it was a good idea. So you think at the time it's good to give $9 million to a business that's on the verge of bankruptcy. This is the sort of insanity that we've been putting up with as taxpayers. And the reason why we're paying taxes so high is just exactly that. Wasting money, building highways that don't need to be built. They're putting a $50 million museum in St. John. Do you think a museum is really that important in our day and age with what we're dealing with as a province, that we have to put $50 million into a museum? How about putting $50 million into the DTI and get some of these roads fixed? How about putting $50 million into your health care, get some new doctors, hire some nurses that are desperately needed? How about new teachers or TAs? Put the $50 million into that stuff. Look, 5, 10 years down the road, we start running a surplus every year, and the debt's being paid off, and we're running some good government service. You want to build a museum? I'll build you 2 museums. But until that day comes, we got to get our books in order. We got to make sure our government's much more efficient than it is right now. So we're going to end corporate welfare. We're going to eliminate the small business tax. We're going to get rid of the double tax. We're going to, the money we're saving, giving out to big corporations, producing jobs that we don't even know what comes out of it, how many jobs are created, how long they last. There's no statistics or data that they present publicly on any of that. So there's a big question mark on what's really, other than a good photo op for a politician, right? You sit, you cut the ribbon, hoorah, 350 jobs, $9 million, and go get elected again. Well, people have got to start thinking differently. 350 jobs. How many of those 350 jobs were actually made? The ones that were actually made, how long did they last? How much come out of their wages in terms of taxpayers that funded that? So all kinds of questions that I want answers to as a taxpayer to know where my money's going. So we're eliminating corporate welfare. We're going to use the money to eliminate small business tax, eliminate the double tax, and we're going to make changes to the Motor Vehicle Act. Just curious, show of hands here tonight. How many in here over the last, say, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, months, that you had to register your vehicle? Just curious, if you don't mind me asking, what did it cost you to register your vehicle?
$161.
161? 140? 75?
50-something for my farm tractor.
For your what? Your
Farm tractor.
farm tractor, 50-something for a farm tractor? Skidoos? Four-wheelers? ATVs, right? If you own more than one vehicle, right, you can double that or whatever, you're paying more. Have you ever, when you're registering your vehicle, sat in a Service New Brunswick line and thought to yourself, why am I being required to do this? What is the purpose of registering your vehicle every year? I mean, you own the vehicle. The Service New Brunswick is well aware you own the vehicle because when you bought it, you had to pay the taxes on it. Right? And when you paid the taxes on it, they registered the vehicle when you first bought it, whether it's used or new, it doesn't matter. They know you own the vehicle. So we go every year, we renew this vehicle. We've asked these departments, and we've done some research. We said, what's the purpose? What is the purpose of registering your vehicle every year? And every time we ask, we get this deer in the headlights look. What do you mean? I don't know the purpose. Well, yes, we're paying. Why? And we come to the conclusion there's no reason we register our vehicles every year other than to give the government more money to waste. Right? That's what it is. It's a tax grab. So what we are saying is, if you eliminate annual registrations to a one-time registration, so you go out and you buy a new vehicle, you register that vehicle once. If you own that vehicle for 4 or 5 years, you never have to register it again. If you take that vehicle and you sell it to someone down the road, that person down the road would pay the registration on that vehicle under their name, and so long as they own it, they don't have to register it again. So as it changes ownership, you register the vehicle. So long as you own the vehicle, you keep the money. You don't have to register it. And I promise you, the $150, $160, $140, or $300 if you're paying for two, that extra money you're paying every year, what are you going to do with it? Of course you're going to spend it. You're not going to put it in a bottle and tuck it under your bed, right? You're going to spend it. You're going to buy something you need. You're going to buy something you want. You're going to go out for a weekend. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to spend it. So when you spend that money in the private sector, right, you're putting money back into the economy. And when it goes back into the economy, 15% is coming out with tax anyway, because you're going to be taxed on it. So the government's going to recoup that 15% of the $150 that you're not paying in a vehicle registration. So we're firm believers. If you empower the people to allow them to keep more money in their pocket, the economy will once again pick up and thrive and grow. So we're going to eliminate annual vehicle registration. I'm going to close with this, and then we'll open it up to question and answer. But really, of all these things that we've talked about, and these are just a few, we're going to have more as we come out into our platform. There's other issues that we've been fighting for. But at the very center of it all is the reality that our system of politics and government in New Brunswick is flat out broke. The system is broke. You say, well, why do I say that? If you look at an election, okay, every 4 years we go and we cast our ballot and we elect Liberal, we elect Conservative. That's all we've ever done here in the province. So we elect red or we elect blue. Core had their kick at it. Generally, we elect red or blue. So, whether red or blue is elected, they go to Fredericton, and they're good people. I believe the majority of MLAs are good people that get into it with a sincere desire to want to change things. The problem is not always with the MLA. The problem fundamentally lies with the system itself. You can take a good MLA, put them in a broken system, and what you're going to have is still a broken system, right? So the MLA is elected red or blue. What they do is they follow party line first and the people second. So if there's an issue that comes up in your riding, and you go to your MLA, Liberal or Conservative, and they'll say, oh, I'm fighting for the people. No, you're not fighting for the people. You're fighting for your party. Right? Because I promise you, if your MLA held a town hall like this on a particular issue, whatever the issue is, okay, and the consensus among the people in that room, and they're going out to coffee shops, they're talking to people, trying to find a consensus of the riding, what's the majority of the people think in this riding? If that consensus is in direct conflict with party direction, I promise you that MLA will do one of two things. They'll either forget you and vote party line, or in the very rare occasion, I can't think of an instance, but if there ever was a rare occasion where they say, the heck with the party, I'm going to vote with the people, then it's only a matter of time the party comes out and says, you're no longer part of this party anymore. Now folks, I don't care how you slice that pie, that's a broken system. When the people's voice is now muzzled over party agendas, we have a broken system. So what we are saying as a party is that the MLA, Art O'Donnell here, when he's elected, his role and his mandate and his job is to represent the people that voted him in. I'm not going to be voting for Art because I'm running in my own riding. Do you understand? The people of my riding depend on me. The people of this riding depend on him. So when they come to him with a consensus, they come to him with an issue, he has the right and the fundamental duty to represent the people here over the party objective, with the exception of the party platform. Here's why. So come September, we're going to have our own platform. We're going to list out what our commitments are, what our targets are, what our goals are, what we're committing to as a party. All of us as candidates are going to be going around knocking doors, telling people You know, we're going to end duality, we're going to eliminate corporate welfare, we're going to get rid of small business tax and double tax, we're going to relay our platform to people. When we're elected, we are elected on that platform. So the people have already said, yes, like your platform, you got my vote, you get enough votes, you get elected, you've got that mandate. So I would expect all the MLAs elected would vote in favor of this mandate, because if they don't vote in favor of this mandate, they're not listening to the people, because the people elected them on that platform. However, in the legislature, of course, of 4 years, there's all kinds of bills and legislations and issues and policies. There's all kinds of things that come up on a 4-year basis that have nothing to do with a party's platform. Nothing to do with it. It's in those instances, and there are many, more so than the party platform, in those instances, your MLA under the People's Alliance banner will be free to vote in favor of the people that elected him or her. Simple as that. Free vote. And I don't care what kind of snake oil the other parties will try to sell you. They never have, and they never will allow that kind of system in New Brunswick. Because that system doesn't work for the people. But that system works for the parties. And they don't want to give up that power or that control. It's only until the people themselves demand it and step up and say, we're tired of this broken system, and we're tired of being muzzled, and we're tired of not having our MLAs represent us, that's when things will change. And this is exactly why we are so passionate about doing what we're doing. That's why we have candidates and volunteers that travel this province on a steady basis, telling people, this is a chance to really change the way the system operates in New Brunswick, and to bring representation back, and to get back to some common sense policies and ideas. If the other parties always feel like if the other parties don't want to talk about it, or they skirt an issue, that's the very issue we want to tackle head on. Let's just tackle it head on, and let's see what the issue is, and let's find a solution and make this work. So I believe that this is going to be a great year. We've been growing in momentum everywhere we go. Our membership has gone up, I think, around 23% in the last 6 months, so we see a growth in our membership. We're getting decent crowds in our town halls. So we're very optimistic of the change that can come here in September. But folks, this is where you come in. And I can't stress enough how much we need your support. And all we're asking from you is to look at what we're saying, evaluate what we're saying, and if you agree with what we're saying, get behind your local candidate. Make sure you tell others about the party and what we stand for. Make sure you tell others about Art O'Donnell and how he can stand and fight for the people here at home. Because until we change the system, nothing is really going to change. And if anybody can convince me what the difference is between a red government and a blue government, I'd be shocked. Because I've heard people all over, and I said, what is the difference? Red government will raise your taxes, blue government will raise your taxes. Red government will waste money, blue government will waste money. They all give money to corporate welfare.
Gives you a headache.
It gives you a headache. I sit on these panels, again, that we had these debates, and I listen to people that are elected, that are in the system, that will say things like, if it's the blue, will say to the red, you guys are wasting money. You're giving money to big business, and why are you giving money, $9 million to TD Bank? Why are you doing it though? And I'm thinking, when you were in government, you did the exact same thing, exactly the same thing. You gave money to big business. You did that. So how can you criticize? And you know what will happen? The blue will get in, and then the red will be sitting in the other chair saying, how did you give that money to TD Bank? How could you do that? So it's just this back and forth, and there's no credibility anymore. There's no real foundation there on ideology or objectives. It's just whichever they think will get them elected. So we've got to change the way we think. We've got to change the way we vote. I know I'm rambling on, but I've got to give you this one last thing. What time is it?
10-2 last night.
10-2. Okay, so you still get the game, because here's a good one for you. I've said this before in town hall, so I apologize if you guys have heard this 50 times. But my grandfather, he was a die-hard Maple Leafs fan. I mean die-hard. And I remember every Saturday night, Grampy would be sitting in front of the TV watching Hockey Night in Canada. And it didn't matter how bad the Maple Leafs played. And believe me, you know as well as I do, they can play bad when they want to. But it didn't matter how bad they played, he was committed to the Maple Leafs. I remember, Grant would be sitting on the couch, and I was, young at the time, and sweat would be pouring down his forehead, and, they wouldn't make a stop, or there'd be no defense, or the offense would be terrible, and he'd take the pillow and throw it at the TV, and I'm done with you, blah, blah, blah. Next Saturday, guess where Grant would be? Same spot on the couch, watching the same team play the same terrible game. Right? And I thought to myself, that type of loyalty and commitment and dedication is great for hockey. But I'll tell you folks, in politics, it's absolutely terrible. Because what it does, when you vote because your grandfather voted this way, or my father voted this way, or this is what our family votes, if you vote that way, what you are essentially doing is giving the two parties carte blanche to do whatever they want. Because they count on that. The two parties count. We'll just get our base out and we'll win the election. They didn't care what's in their platform. Just rally that base. That's why when you talk to these guys and you ask them a direct question, when the media comes and asks them directly, they'll skirt all around it. I mean, they'll talk for 10 minutes and say nothing because they depend on that base. Oh, he'll vote Liberal. He's always voted Liberal his whole life. Of course he's going to vote Liberal. Oh, they'll vote Conservative. Oh, yeah, the grandfather always voted Conservative. That's what's got to change. I can't stress that enough. But I get it. I understand how hard it is to break tradition and to do something different. But folks, look around. Just look around. Look at the management. Look at how bad the government has gotten and how bad our system has gotten over the years. We can't keep doing this just for some shallow loyalty, which is producing nothing for the people of the province. So I'm encouraging you. Look at what we're saying. Check it out. And you make up your own mind. Because I believe change is in the air. I think the timing is right. And we are going to bring that change. And I'll tell you what. We're asking for 4 years. We're asking for 4 years. Give us your vote. Give us 4 years. If at the end of 4 years we don't accomplish what we said we're going to accomplish and you're not convinced that we've done a good job, vote us out. You'll never hear a politician say, vote us out. I'll tell you right now, if we don't do what we say we're going to do, you have the opportunity to go back to the old ways. But I'm convinced if we can implement some of these things and start to bring change in this province, I know we can turn things around. Thank you very much.
Chris, what's your take on the language commissioner? Everybody else, she was like over here not too long ago. I have a feeling it's probably the same caliber as Dr. Carey was. She was given an ultimatum either to retire or be fired.
Yeah.
The president, any government employee doesn't like her. Mr. Glenn knows that. I feel that he give her that ultimatum, get out or I'll push her.
No, I mean, it could be. I don't want to speculate why she's leaving, but I will. I'm thinking possibly public pressure, I mean, look, people of this province, they don't want that type of division. They don't want that type of government inserting itself into, every single thing in terms of language. And the language commissioner is one piece of the problem, but it's not the whole problem. But we're convinced if you get rid of the office, just the whole office together, you have an ombudsman, which if you're a citizen of New Brunswick and you feel like your language rights are being violated, you can go see the ombudsman, write him a letter. You've got a minister in charge of official languages. You can talk to that individual. There's all kinds of processes or places you can go for language complaints. You don't need a separate office that costs $500,000 a year. You don't need it. So I'll tell you what I'd do with that off. Now Catherine Doshwan is stepping down in July, but I agree with you. She's going to step down while somebody else is going to fill the role. So the problem is still going to be there. The office itself has to go. And what we would do is $500,000 we're paying to that office every year, we're going to dump into the Auditor General's office. Because every dollar the Auditor General receives an extra funding, I'm convinced, would bring $10 back to government revenue through finding the waste and mismanagements in the departments.
There's so many government employees right now that are afraid. They won't speak out.
We get their emails all the time, confidentially. So we know, we're well aware of the problems in whether, and we have people that are working for government that can't advance because of language. We have other people that are skilled that want to work for the government that can't even get a job in the first place because of language. So we just got to say, look, folks, let's tone this down a bit and let's bring some rational thinking and make sure that where the need is, we meet the need. But there's areas of the province where the numbers just simply don't support it. Any other questions? You must really want to get him so much of the
I know you for a while. I feel there's been a lot of overeducated people, and I shouldn't say that because some doctors are very smart, some lawyers are very good, but I feel we've been led astray on purpose by a lot of these parties, because when I look down the road, I either got a lawyer looking after forestry, I got a doctor instead of looking after that, he may be looking after finance, they may be the great and they may be the smartest people in their department around this country, but when you stick them into something they don't know. So I'm saying, what do you think of the bureaucrats below? How do you get change if you got the same guy sitting across the table passing the same paper no matter what party's in there, and hard to say who's paying them. If you can't cut the head off the snake, how do you get change within the system?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And there's no question when you look at the bureaucracy on the higher end. Okay, now I'm not talking about the lower end in the front line. I mean, they do essential roles every day, but higher end, yes, that is an issue. And I'm of the very firm belief that when we're elected by the people. And so the ultimate authority in a democracy rests with the people and those that are elected by the people. So if changes have to be made in the system, whether it's bureaucracy, nothing should override the elected officials' direction for their own portfolio, whether it's health, education, finance, whatever it is. That individual should be the one leading the direction on that, not the bureaucrats underneath. Now, with that said, obviously, anybody in any department has to have people underneath them that are giving them information and reports so that they know what's going on in the department. I mean, that's obvious. But it has to be, like you said, not the same spoon-fed stuff that's been fed before. You know, give me some new ideas. What things can we do that we haven't tried before? And if you can't get new ideas, maybe you need to get new people to give those ideas. Any other questions, folks?
The arbitrator on the ambulance you came in favor of, is the government going to squash that, or is it squashed already?
The arbitrator, if you haven't, for those of you that haven't read the arbitrator's report, you've got to go read it. I think it's on the QP website. But he just nailed it. I mean, he could have taken it out of our platform, everything he was saying. It was just bang, bang, bang. But to answer your question, the arbitrator made a decision. I found it was a reasonable and straightforward decision. But the government is already talking about taking it to court. So that's what the government does. It was the same thing with the dual busing thing, right? There was an area of the province, I think down in the Rexon area, where they were having French and English kids on the same bus. Everything was working fine. Parents were happy. Communities were happy, saving money. Everybody's together. Everything's good. When the government found out French and English kids were traveling on the same bus, they said, "Oh no, we can't have that." And then they started this, pushing in that area for dual busing again. And then when the issue became hot, rather than make a decision, which they're elected to do, they tried to kick it to the courts as a political hot potato. And the courts basically said back to them, "You sure you want us to do this?" And then that's when the government backed off. So I don't know where this will go with the arbitration with the paramedics, but I know the government well enough to know they'll take everything to court instead of make a decision that needs to be made.
What about the forestry act? You going to look at the forestry deal that's going on now with the Crown land?
The forestry is a big issue, definitely, in rural New Brunswick. We do have a forestry policy right now that's kind of in the works. What I can tell you, what I can commit to tonight, that we've already committed to, is we're going to ban glyphosate spraying on Crown land and along the power line. And the idea behind that ban is, for us and what we've researched, there's just too many questions around it on habitat, environment, public health, the whole 9 yards. And it depends on which report you read. Some reports will say it's fine. Another report will raise questions on the substance. So we're looking at it from that aspect, but we're also looking at it in terms of job creation. Like we believe in the research we've done, if you don't have people flying in a helicopter or a plane spraying this chemical on the ground, then you have to do it the way you used to do it, right? people out in the woods, men and women working, you know, silviculture, management of the forest. So jobs can be created in forestry by stopping the spraying. The Stop Spraying Group estimated, and we estimated in our last platform, around 1,000 jobs could be created in forestry by stopping spraying. So it's the questionable effects on health, habitat, and environment, but it's also job creation if we end that practice. But we're going to have more details to it.
Targeting trades doesn't work, never has, never will, and it doesn't work in anything. It doesn't work in farming. I was a computer tech my last 2 years in the military. At that time, they were getting $20 an hour on the street. The government decided to end the cod fishery and trained every fisherman to be a computer tech. By the day I retired, they were standing at the end of the McDonald Bridge with a sign saying, "We'll work for experience."
Right,
So they literally killed the trade.
right.
My brother-in-law's a farmer. They decided they weren't growing enough pigs, so they paid a whole bunch of farmers to grow pigs, so they all went into it, and the next thing you know, the price of pork was nothing. And if you interfere with the normal progression of stuff, it just kills it.
The idea behind, I guess what I'm saying, is to provide the private sector with skilled workers for the need, not to fabricate a need, right? It's not to create a need that's not there, but find what need's going to be there and make sure that you have the skilled workers, because what we have in the province is we have skilled workers that are not staying here, maybe due to language, maybe due to other things, but at the same time they're leaving, and you have the private sector saying we need skilled workers. So this, again, and I guess I would agree to disagree if that's okay, but at the same time I feel to give carte blanche, free tuition for any industry, what happens is they're getting their education, their diploma, their master's, whatever they're getting, and they're leaving the province. So all of us as taxpayers are paying for post-secondary education without the benefits of the person working here in New Brunswick. Now, one thing the previous government did well, which I do applaud, is they had the tuition tax credit. So, you know, when you went to university or college, when you graduated, if you stayed and worked in New Brunswick, you could use your tuition as a tax credit. So essentially over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long it took, you could get your tuition free because you're staying and working in New Brunswick. That to me makes sense. I like that idea.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep, and it benefits everybody in the end. So I will give the previous government credit on that one for sure. Any other questions, folks?
One more, and I'm going. Immigration's coming to the province. I think it was on the news tonight, we're bringing some more people in.
Mm-hmm.
The present ones we brought in, I don't know if they're working yet or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so many people that don't have work, plus who's going to pay those people?
Yeah. Our party stance, I mean, immigration as a whole is, a lot of it is federal, but there is some provincial components to that as well. We're not opposed to immigration. What we want to see is not solely relying on immigration. That's what we're afraid of. Like when you look at what the private sector is saying, what government's trying to push, is that immigration is like the silver bullet for the lack of skilled workforce. My concern with that is we have people either here not working or people that are leaving that I'd like to see repatriated back here, to get them working. And again, you have to have a certain amount of immigration in here with a certain skill set. But this idea that immigration is going to solve all of our economic woes, I'm like you, I certainly don't buy it. I think we're better off to invest in our own people first and make sure that we have that balance with immigration second.
Mr. Frank McKenna doesn't think that way.
No, well, me and Mr. McKenna probably don't think the same way in a lot of things. Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate you coming out. Have a good night.